Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, Successful Women and the Employee Experiences that Shape Their Careers. We're going to give everybody a minute or two to continue straggling in, and then we will get started right at the top of the hour. Thanks. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for attending our session this morning. We've got a couple people still trickling in, so welcome to everybody who's here. This is a webinar called Successful Women and the Employee Experiences that Shaped Their Careers. We're going to start out with a quick, I'm going to go over the agenda really quickly, and then we'll dive right in. So we have an hour today. We're going to do quick introductions of our lovely panelists who you can see right now. We're going to do a 45-minute panel discussion that includes polls throughout, and then we'll finish up with a 15-minute Q&A. If you participate in the polls, you will be entered for a fabulous giveaway of 2 hardcover coffee table books dedicated to strong, influential women, which is the topic of discussion today. So let's get started with a quick introduction of all of our panelists. Let's start with Ms. Bailey.
Oh, thanks, Kate. Welcome to everyone joining. My name's Bailey Sweet. I am the director for the E&J Gallo Winery. I work in sales. I've been with the winery for just over 12 years, and I cover the New England area. So for those that don't know, the E&J Gallo Winery is the largest privately owned winery in the world. We were started in 1933 in Modesto, California, right after Prohibition. And if you need recommendations for your Thanksgiving dinner, I'll make sure Kate gets you my contact info, and we'll get you some wine on that table.
Nice. Thank you, Bailey. Jen, go ahead.
Well, I don't have a connection for wine, so sorry about that, but I'm very excited to be here, so thank you, Kate. So my name is Jen Dold. I'm Senior Director of Demand Generation at a software company in Boston called PTC. I like to say that I have 2 jobs because when I'm not at PTC, I am a mom of 2 boys that are 10 and 13 that keep me running on the other end of my working day. So.
Very nice. Welcome. Alex, go ahead.
Thanks. I will echo what Jen said. So first and foremost, I'm the Director of Global Alliances here at Acumatica. I've spent the last 23 years in software sales, either in direct roles or alliance and channel roles. I also have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old that keep me busy. So flexibility and balancing the 2 of those throughout my career has been a big part of what shaped my career.
Great, thank you. And Lauren, last but not least.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren McCullum. I am the VP of Corporate Marketing at LogMeIn. We are Boston-based. We actually are the makers of GoToWebinar, which we're using here today, and also a lot of other technology that connects employees, GoToMeeting, makes for a frictionless work experience like LastPass, Password Manager. So I've been in technology marketing my entire career. Been doing it 20 years. I also have 2 children at home. 10 and 7, which keep me on my toes. So yeah, definitely agree with Alex. It's something that definitely shapes your day-to-day. So.
Yes, amen. And my name is Kate Mary. I am a content marketing manager here at Akumina, and I'm joined also off camera. You can't see her, but my colleague Sam is here. She's helping to run the webinar. She's going to be running all our polls, and she's our marketing automation manager.
Hi, everyone.
So we're going to start out with a quick poll. So if you are an attendee, you should see a poll question pop up on your screen. Our first question is, at your organization, how many women do you currently have on your executive team? Do you see that? There we go. So you can select one of the following: 0, 1 through 5, 5 to 10, more than 10. We'll give everybody a second to submit their answers. Thank you for participating too. Remember what you're working for. Okay. So the results are in. We have 66% said that there are between 1 and 5 women on their executive team. And that kind of feeds into our stats on our next slide. If you want to hit the slide. Oh, sorry, we lost our slides. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So we all know that that women are sorely underrepresented in the C-suite. Only 44% of companies have 3 or more women in their C-suite, and about 1 in 5 executives is a woman. Given the critical role that top executives play, having even one woman up at that level is huge in shaping the culture of a business. So we're trying to get people up there, and we're working toward it. So let's do a quick another poll. We'll do another one. Poll number 2 is, have you ever been the only female in a professional meeting? Or if you're a gentleman in the audience, have you ever attended a meeting with just 1 or fewer females present? We like to call this the only experience, in which you're the only one. We have an overwhelming response of yes right now, and 60-70% have voted yeah. Okay, so I think it's fair to say that we've probably all been in that situation. 85% of you guys said yes, and 15% of you said no. And I know, Bailey, you have thoughts on this subject.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sure others will as well. You know, it's interesting, that experience of being the only has probably marked my career. So my first role as a field sales representative in a sales team of probably 60, I was the only female. Last week's meeting in a boardroom, I was the only female. So for the last 12 years, in many parts of, and in every leadership position I've had, there are definitely moments where I've been the only. When I reflected upon this concept, though, one thing I'll say is I look back and I saw it actually as an advantage rather than a disadvantage. So while I think the concept of being the only sets you apart, I also think it gives you a stage, right? I think it gives you a stage to perform. So when I noticed it most differentially, or where it was really able to set me apart, was when I got into a managerial role where I was leading teams and showing high quality leadership. Because one thing I think that we need more in leadership now, than ever before, is emotional intelligence. That's like a big buzzword right now in leadership and looking for future leaders and what makes great ones. And not for nothing, because there are definitely men who have great emotional intelligence. I quite frankly think this is something women have in spades. I think it comes to us naturally. I think we're naturally more compassionate. I think we have a natural ability to see the other side and want to find mutual agreement. And I think that really pays dividends when you want to be an executive in terms of leadership and the ability to have vision and lead others. There are certainly moments and good advice I've received. You know, I think it was Sheryl Sandberg that actually said, like, take a seat at the table. You know, you walk into a room, make sure you go believe like you belong there, because you do. But ultimately, I think being the only has actually benefited me more than it's worked against me.
Yeah, can I just add
That's
to that?
an interesting perspective. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, being only in the room gives you a chance to either reinforce gender bias or break through gender bias. So I think Bailey's point about sit at the table, don't sit at the chairs around the table, because then you're just sort of reinforcing, like, I'm the only female in the room, I'm going to sit in the back row. This is a chance for you to sort of have that presence and really stand up for yourself and other women.
And I think the female voice, once if you're an authority and an expert in your field, at the end of the day, you're offering diversity of thought, which any organization needs. A table full of women might not be ideal either, in the sense of we just need more diversity of thought at the table, and having people from all walks of life, gender, ethnicity, etc., that makes an organization great because it represents what's out in the world.
One thing that I think people are really, a female is really good at in that setting is looking around at the other people at the table. And when there's that person that's trying to get that idea in, they're picking up those cues maybe a little bit more than, other people, and they can interject and say, hey, I think, Jim had something to say, or, Brian, you look like you're not understanding that, what's going on, let's talk about that. Whereas sometimes I don't think that will always be called out when there isn't that diversity at the table. So that's something that I've kind of just seen in general.
Yep. Excellent point. Excellent. So let's look at a couple more stats. So we've got very, very little representation. Again, this is sort of echoing our previous slide. It's just that for every 100 men who were promoted to management, only 72 were promoted. It's not looking good. Let's kick off one more poll. Okay, so we're going to be talking about being referred to as too emotional. Have you, as a woman in the audience, ever been accused of being too emotional? Or if you're a gentleman in the audience, have you ever heard a female colleague been referred to as emotional or too emotional, or had somebody comment on their emotion when they're feeling passionate about something? The numbers are coming in, and they're stacked right where you would expect them to be. 72% for, oh yeah. Yeah. Wow. So 72% of you said that yes, you have been called emotional, or you have heard a female colleague be called emotional. Lauren, you want to tackle this subject?
It's funny because, anytime you do these panels, you kind of get to do the meet and greet beforehand. And we were talking about this earlier in the week, and our first version of this question, like kind of considering this topic as a whole, was like, have you ever cried at work? And guess what? I have. I have a couple different triggers. Yeah, I have a couple different triggers. When I'm really, really frustrated, or when I'm really, really proud, and not pride in and of it's like in self, but pride in my team, pride in my colleagues. It gets me like really choked up. I'm like a team player type of person, but it gets me really choked up when I see a team come together and pull something off that felt like at the start of it was going to be really hard to accomplish. I get really kind of emotional about that. And then when we started getting into the essence of the question, it really came back was being tagged as emotional, and I prefer to use the term passionate. It's funny because, again, when we talked about this as a group, when we all met earlier, and the choice of language was really interesting to me. If you were ever to ask a male colleague the question, would you ever ask a male colleague the question, like, why are you getting so emotional? Probably not. I've heard, different words used. I've heard, why are you getting so angry? Why are you so bullish on this? Very different terminology. And guess what? Men are emotional too. And we just use different terms to describe it. So the choice of phrasing to describe male passion versus female passion is sort of what doesn't really sit well with me. But here's the thing, guys. I am emotional because I'm human, and humans have emotions. I work with other humans who, guess what? They also have emotions. So I bring my whole self to work. And for a long time, especially in my career in tech, I think I feared, being labeled too emotional or too passionate. So I put on a work Lauren hat, and then I had, you know, the home Lauren hat. And I didn't let those personas kind of cross-pollinate on purpose and by design. And what I found in the times when I let people in, whether those were my peers, my colleagues, and I shared really who I was and what makes me tick, what makes me passionate as a person, that I actually gained some level of credibility. I became more approachable. I became somewhat trusted. You know, not to overuse the phrase, but we were talking about this earlier, you know, you become more authentic. So, you know, you can always have too much of a good thing. You know, I wouldn't recommend to everyone to, you know, throw caution to the wind and let your freak flag fly. But it does mean it's okay to let others see what you care about and why you care about it. So that's kind of been my perspective. And, you know, I definitely probably am labeled a more emotional person, and I have learned to kind of more embrace it and not let the words in and of themselves kind of, you know, define what I think I need to take from that. It's not necessarily always a bad thing. So.
Great. Alex, do you want to weigh in on this one?
Do we have me doing promotions and raises as well as mentorship? Or we put them together?
Nope, we have you on mentorship, but you feel free to jump in whenever you want. Or anyone, really.
They really do cross-pollinate. Really, part of, I think, evangelizing and being an advocate for yourself is often knowing, you know, where do you sit? What is the reality of how you're perceived? There's not always in every career a linear path to the next step. Quite often, there's a lot of internal, sometimes it can be politics, right? In terms of how you secure your next position. And that's work that has to be mapped out 3-4 years ahead of time. You're serving as an individual contributor, let's say in a sales role, and it is your goal to become, you know, part of an executive team or a director, right? Is this something that's going to happen, you know, overnight? One of the things that you need to understand is if you're seeking a promotion or asking a promotion, have you done your homework? Have you looked into it and have a good understanding of two things. What have your predecessors, what have the people before you've done to get there? Because they're in charge of hiring you. And if you've been enrolled for a year and haven't shown success and haven't mimicked the same kind of behavioral steps that they have taken, they're really probably not going to endorse you. You know, the other is, you know, are you credible? And so one of the things that we talked about before this meeting is how do we link all these things that we're talking about today? And so asking for promotions and asking for raises isn't just about knowing your self-worth, it's being credible. It's having that authentic voice and knowing what you bring to the table. I myself think have been, this has probably been one of the biggest challenges of my career, which I think surprises. Lauren kind of hit on it, being those like two different people. If you meet me in my personal life, I think you'd be like, gosh, she's so aggressive. She's so bullish. She, you know, told me my hair looked awful this morning. You know, I'm very you know, take a stand and also know my self-worth. The other part of that is I know I'm a good friend. I don't question my mothering skills. It's kind of a lie, but my point is I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm good at. So why, when I come to work, am I questioning that? And I think it hits on everything that we've hit so far. I think it's hit on Jen talking about taking a seat at the table. I think it hits on Bailey being the only in the room. And I think it hits on Lauren, you know, am I being too emotional? And so first and foremost, I think asking for raises and asking for promotion means you need to take a step back. You need to do your homework. You need to align yourself with good mentors and a good sponsor. We'll talk about this a little bit later about the differences between the two, but you cannot ask for a promotion and a raise without understanding what goes into it and the criteria that supports it.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I mean, I had a boss tell me years ago, like, no one's going to come up behind you and tap you on the shoulder and say, you know, Jen, you know, I want to give you this role. I mean, it might happen, but at the end of the day, you're responsible for your path and your own career. So, you know, if you feel like you're contributing at a higher level than where you're being recognized for, then, you know, there's no qualms in asking for it. You know, guys will ask for it and they'll get it. And if you don't ask for it, you won't get it. If there's a role that comes up that you're interested in, they're not going to sit around and say, oh, we think Jen would be the perfect candidate if they don't know that I'm even interested in making a move. So, you have to advocate for yourself. I think that's critical. But second to that, I would say, especially for people earlier in their career, if you're going to put yourself out there and say, I want this promotion or I want this increase, have some data to back this up. It's not just because I want it or my rent went up, so I need more money. These are the things that I'm doing for the company. These are the things, this is what I've been able to give back, and, really have some proof points to illustrate that. And I, as a manager, will then say, okay, yeah, I get it. This person really deserves it. So it's not just because you want it, but it's because you've, really proven yourself that you deserve it.
I love that concept of like having it be data driven, because I think a lot of times, I think earlier in my career, and not even in my career, in like life, I kind of grew up with this philosophy that if I do a good job, it will get recognized and something good will happen. So kind of this meritocracy framework. And while I would love to think that, good works equal results and equal opportunity, sometimes you do have to advocate for yourself. And you need to do that by when you're working on a big project or you just got through something, make a mental note, like keep a little OneNote, file someplace, because guess what, right now, we're probably all of us going through some level of year review process. And we all have to sit down and do our self-evaluations, and it, then rolls into a compensation cycle and performance cycle discussion. But you're doing great work. A lot of people here and on this call, on this webinar, are probably doing really awesome things. So keep that little checklist somewhere, just keep a little file on your desktop that you can kind of just on your phone, so you can remind yourself of the things where you're driving value for the business. And I think when you have an opportunity to be a little introspective on that, you can then go back and say, gosh, where are the times that I delivered a lot of value, but I also felt really personally fulfilled? That will help you decide, where do you want to be next? When everyone talks about the term career pathing and career journeys, I don't think any one of us sat down and was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this for 2 years, and a year later, it's going to have a conversation. It's not linear. It's sometimes messy. It doesn't always happen that way. So I think giving yourself moments for that kind of internal audit. What did you do? How did you feel about it? Were you kind of hitting the stride of highest point of contribution and highest impact, and you were feeling good about it? Because those are the things that are going to start to steer you in a direction. It should help shape, I know we're going to get into mentoring, but it should help shape maybe people you might look at in your business, professional life or business life, to who you might want to think about getting closer to learning more. So I don't know, just some tips, because as we all stare at those reviews at the end of the year, and if you didn't do that kind of process ongoing, sometimes that can feel like a drag, and we forget about the contributions that we're making to our businesses.
I think that's such a good point on the review front, because I think it's hard for women especially to really own their greatness and own their contribution. And, I remember once putting together my performance review, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, you know what, I really did do that. And I had to really acknowledge that I did do that and feel a sense of gratitude and accomplishment. And I don't know if people always do that. I mean, it goes back to this whole thing of having the confidence to sit at the table, have the confidence to own the things that that you're contributing. I think that's a critical piece here.
I want to chime in a little bit on Lauren hit on, I think 99% of it, and just one more best practice to add to the top of it, and to give it a little bit, of how it shaped me and my path. So she mentioned OneNote. I had, an Excel document, and column 1 was the date, column 2 was what it is I did, and column 3 was kind of, divided into a few categories. I had, making others great, right? It was something I did for something else. So I created categories: making others great, driving impact, and that was usually revenue related. And I think I had a third, it probably was professional development. And, if you look back at the end of the year, it's almost impossible to think of the little things you do. And they also sometimes seem stupid. I took a call with 5 new hires and helped them. You don't write that in your end of the year review. But what it was is, as Lauren refers to, you look at that spreadsheet that has everything. I filter on it and I look at, let's say, revenue, right? Like the deals that I closed. And what's important at the end of the review, or when you're asking for this promotion and for the raise, is that you have to add, you have to take it away from being emotional, I did, therefore I want, into another column that was added, and that is impact. So let's say, for example, you spent 3 months on a sale, and you put in it all, all these great things that you did on a sale. You uplifted the employees that worked with you by training them on the new product. You had a new hire. You had professional development. You had all these things. But guess what? On the impact thing, you lost the sale.
Right.
You didn't get the sale. Right. So, that's much different. That's a different story than, my work led to a 5% increase in revenue. And so just make sure that you're linking what you do, because once you filter it, you might be like, that's something I did that's great, but it's not going to get me a promotion because it didn't have impact. It was something great, but it didn't impact the things that were important to the business.
Right. There's a difference between activities and results. So you could say, I put on 10 events this year, but
Right.
did those 10 events lead to closed won opportunities for your business? And if they didn't, then that's great that you accomplished those and you did them seamlessly. But to Alex's point, they're not driving results. So I think that's an important piece.
So if I can just wrap up with one thing, I just want to remind women and encourage them that when you're asking for these things, it will feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you must ask, because to Jen's point, I think you don't get what you don't ask for. You are actually, I think, in some of your greatest self when you're uncomfortable, because it puts you in a position while out of your comfort zone to get more. I remember when I was negotiating offer, my hands were shaking, my voice was shaking, but I asked for things for a living. I'm in sales, and I was asking for more money, and I couldn't even bear the fact that I was asking for more money. Did I get all of it? No, but I got more than my original offer. So I just want to encourage you, everyone on the call, to go do the things you think you can't do. Go do them.
And to, I think, Bailey's point, especially when it's negotiating a new offer, it's not even always about comp, right? If you don't ask for, more vacation, a sign-on bonus, more stocks, or whatever your package might look like, you're leaving stuff on the table. I know for a fact, because I've talked to hiring managers through the years, that they've had candidates come in and just leave stuff on the table that was there and available, but they didn't ask. So if you don't ask, you're not going to get it.
Kate, I know you probably want us to move on, but clearly the panelists here are passionate about this one. Here's something I read. I wish I actually had the actual data point to back it up. It's probably pretty similar to a pay gap, probably a 70% type thing. But that women, when going for promotions, will wait until they've achieved what is needed for that role. So, for example, Lauren is an individual contributor. She wants to move to a director role. Weird echo there. She's waiting until after a year or maybe 18 months of reflecting and stepping in and taking on responsibilities of a director role to say to management, look what I've done. Don't I deserve the role? Whereas men, or again, I hate to be, gender biased here or presenting it, but like the pay gap, men tend to put themselves forward for applying for jobs to which they don't have the skill sets or are qualified for yet. It is the progression. It is the next step. I challenge each of you, and I know that there's some students on the call today, to take a look at people's LinkedIn profiles and compare gender and compare people's career progression. I bet you dollar to donuts, men have higher turnover rate than their female counterparts. Females will stay in a job for 3 to 5 to 7 years before moving on to a next level, whereas men will jump every 18 months. You don't learn a job in 18 months, you're positioning, you're politicking, you're pushing yourself forward. So for those, be aware of that and ask yourself, why am I not doing that? If that's what you want. For many of us, that's not what we want, but it is an interesting thing to take a look at.
And I think, I know you want to move on, Kate.
No, you're fine. This is great. This is great.
I also think, though, that like we can take a page from what our male colleagues do well. You know what I mean? So like I have found myself in a situation sometimes where, you know, you're talking to people and they're putting themselves forth as like, I want to be considered for X if it comes up, or I want you to know I'm looking for Y. And I found myself kind of internally being like, I would never ask for that. I would never do it that way. But you know what? Kudos to them for doing it. You can learn from that. And you can talk to, like, you know, you can really actually kind of harness some of that and take some skills and approaches that they do well and apply that to how you want to approach it to make it authentic for you. So I think that there are definitely things that you can learn as well. So, you know, just that's kind of all I wanted to say. So.
Yeah, I think that's great. And you know, with the slide that we have up right now, for every $100 that a male makes, the female equivalent makes only 79. So we've got a pay gap, and at the current rate of change, things are changing. They're moving forward. Women are learning to be empowered and get uncomfortable, like you said, Bailey. You know, but at the rate of change that we're moving right now, the pay gap will be closed until 2059. So if you're listening right now, you know, we've got some great advice. I heard tracking activities versus results. You want to focus on the results. You want to keep your spreadsheets. You want to, you know, not leave anything on the table when you're going in for a job. As Jen said, you need to make sure that you're aware of what you could be getting. You need to, you know, ask for things before you've accomplished all that you can accomplish, so that your next step is in planning. I think this is all really, really great advice, and I would also suggest that this is great advice that we can be teaching to our daughters, our nieces, our granddaughters. Something that I feel very passionate about is pushing people to go to college when they're not ready, because I think it's so difficult to know at 18 years old what you're going to do. And with the price of education these days, I think what you said, Lauren, about finding the place where you're accomplishing big things and you're feeling really fulfilled about it, you start tracking those things from a young age, and going forward, you have so much more self-knowledge, and you're not going to be diving into something that you're going to regret, and you're going to be moving forward in the right direction. So I love everything that you guys just said. I wrote it all down. We'll be sharing with my children. And also, the poll that we just ran echoed, I'm very encouraged by this data. It said that 63% of you in the audience have requested a promotion or a raise without having your manager come to you first, which
good for
you. Yeah. That's amazing. I'm really happy to hear that. I think that's great. And so let's lead into our next poll, which is around mentorship, sponsorship, and advocacy. So just a general question. Do you in the audience, do you participate in any sort of sponsorship programs or mentorship programs? I'm sure it's something that everybody is interested in participating in. It's finding the time is really tricky, but wow, it's pretty even, actually.
Yeah, closest one so far.
That's great. Wow, we've got a lot of mentors in the audience. That's amazing. Awesome. So roughly 34% are participating in a program right now, and 65 of you said that you're not quite there, but I'm sure you want to, because everybody does. And Alex, I know this is something that you had talked about specifically. Do you want to share some thoughts on this?
Absolutely. This is something that's so near and dear to my heart that, you know, I think anyone who knows me in the professional world, you know, would be nodding absolutely right now of how important this is to me. When I first started my career well, I mean, I think it happened before Microsoft. Microsoft, you know, was in my early 30s. I had joined Microsoft, and I had been at other great tech companies before. And, you know, but I felt like I'd gone to the big leagues, right? It felt like going, you know, I'd been called up. And I remember feeling like a fraud. I didn't know what I was doing. I would, you know, my hands would sweat every time I had to make a sales call. You know, I had a script. I would, you know, really feel like I was going to get called out for the fraud I was, right? And that was, you know, that I didn't belong in this room. And it was a man, and it was a fantastic man. I, will remember his name to the end of my professional days. And he just helped me so much. And I finally once said to him, why are you helping me so much? What do you want from that? Like, basically, like, do I owe you something? Do you know what I mean? It was kind of this, why is he being so kind to me? And he said the wisest thing, and I've repeated it hundreds of thousands of times. And he said, because someday you'll do it for someone else. And I'm now in my mid 40s, and literally, like, is there a time at work you've gotten emotional? I'll start crying. Last night, yesterday in Manhattan for work, and I got a text on my phone, and it was someone that I had worked for a brief amount of time at Salesforce. And she said, do you have time for me? Right. And she does this every so often. I want to run something by you. And what she wanted to run by me was career advice and how to advocate for herself and all the things that we've just discussed. That's not a formal sponsorship. That is not a formal advocate. That is mentorship. And so let's just kind of take a step backwards from kind of my emotional conversation and for a minute just talk about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. Sponsorship or an advocate is someone who's going to put your name forward at a board meeting. It is someone who quite often might be getting credit for your work, right? You're making this person look good, therefore they're going to advocate for you for that promotion. You are, when you're speaking to them, when you're asking for their time, it's with the intent to impress them with a specific ask that they're helping you push your career forward. That's the difference between a sponsor and an advocate. A mentor is very different. Do not confuse the two. Quite often in large corporations, they will have what they call mentorship programs. Do not be fooled. Those are not times to cry. Those are not times to talk about how work-life balance is such a struggle for you. Those are times for you to bring your best self forward, be prepared, have your homework, have your spreadsheet, talk about what you want to do in your career, talk about your paths, and have specific asks to this sponsor about what you're hoping to get out of them and how they'll endorse you. A mentorship is what I call professional karma. And that's what I call what that gentleman did for me. And if it's professional karma and you believe in this idea of karma, that means it's not always going to be give, get. It's going to be cyclical. You're not going to get back from the same person you give. You're going to be in mentorships positions that might not be as fulfilling as others. And they're going to happen organically. You're going to, after a phone call or a meeting, I'll give a great example. Here are 5 amazing women on the phone, and someone on this call is resonating with one of us. You're looking us up in LinkedIn afterwards. You're asking to connect with us more. We've said something that interests you and you wanted to learn more. That's a relationship, and that relationship starts to form. And as that relationship starts to form, you realize that person has something to offer you. In that mentorship for me in my personal life have been about asking for raises, asking those personal questions. What was it like for you? What do you need to do? But it's also having that Sherpa or that, however you want to call it, your rabbi, some people call it. Who do you go to crying? At the end of the day, who at your office can you go to crying that's going to say to you, here's what you can do? My best examples of mentorship where I gave and I got back was, again, while I was at a very large tech company, I've named it before, and I became a new mother. And someone kind of whispered to me in the hallways, do you know that there's, a program where you can work reduced hours? It's called flex time. It's for really good candidates. And for the next 10 years where I was at this company throughout my children being young, I didn't work on Fridays. No one knew. No one I work with knew. I didn't make it public. I just had my calendar blocked that day and I just worked more on the other days. I then took the opportunity to take what I learned in that and got 10 more women into the program over the course. So when you look at mentorship, you have to think that there's going to be different types of mentorship for different types of your career. Mentorship because I'm a new dad, I'm a new mom. Mentorship because I'm new to a technical role. New because I'm in a new industry. New because I don't know what the heck I'm doing. New because, there's 5 people on my team I don't know how to work with. Or maybe you've been given feedback that you're too anything, too emotional, too slow to respond, might not even be based upon gender bias. Just your communication style needs help. So before you're sending out an email, maybe you're running it by someone. Hey, does this tone of this email seem appropriate? You're pinging that mentor, that friend, that person, either inside of your industry or outside to say, do I sound like an asshole when I say this, or is this the appropriate tone? Right? So don't confuse the two, everybody. They're very distinct differences. And I think in the industry, in this world, we just use the word mentorship to be a blanket statement. And you have to be very careful. Mentorship is personal. Sponsorship is different. I could go on for hours on this, guys. So I'm going to pause and the rest of the panelists who I know have their own experiences. But, you know, I'll put it out there again. Professional karma, you will get what you give, you know, like, you know, the amazing John Lennon quote out there about that, right? But, you know, the love you take is equal to the love you make, man, but you got to put it out there. Don't be expecting to get it if you're not giving it. And do expect to take more in your career in the early stages and be okay with it. And know that your panelists on the phone right now, we're all in the stages of giving back, or we wouldn't be on this panel. This is part of what we're doing now in our career. This is our uplifting. All of us will hang up this phone and feel like we did something today that was meaningful, and that matters to us. So it's got to mean something to you. It's got to be meaningful for the mentor and the mentee, or it's not going to work. It's an emotional connection, mentorship.
Yeah.
Alex, so I think you brought up a good point. If it's a formal program and it's set up through your company, take it seriously. You know, you show up prepared, and you show up with a plan, because especially if someone who's much more senior than you, they probably don't have a lot of extra time. They're wanting to help support you. So be present and know what you want to get out of it going into it. I think that's a really critical piece.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. That's great advice. We're getting a lot of questions too, and there's, just so that you guys know, there's a great reaction, a lot of really good questions coming in from the audience. So everybody is very pleased with what you're saying, and it's resonating with us. I do want to get to those questions. I want to go quickly, if you want to go to the next slide, Sam. So because we're a tech company, obviously, I do want to talk about some technology tools for success that you can use. I know we've mentioned OneNote and, you know, something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet from our Microsoft friend, Alex, which is fine. And I just want to turn over to Jen, because Jen, you provided some really great tools that you use that I think would be helpful for the audience members, because they really helped me. So if you want to just talk about a couple of those, and then we'll get into our Q&A.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, technology is so critical in this day and age. I often think back, like, how do people run businesses with like just telephones and snail mail? Like, I just can't even relate to that. But, you know, we're always on, we're always moving. I have a globally dispersed team. So tools like Skype and Slack enable me to like get in touch with these guys real time. And I think that's so critical, because I'm a very much like hands-on, like, hey, what's going on with this? And so like the idea of sending an email and waiting a day, like I like to have an ongoing dialogue. So those are so critical. And then, you know, I work remotely a couple days a week. So having tools like this, like GoToMeeting or WebEx, sorry, Lauren, are, you know, they're how I stay connected, you know, how I can be part of the meeting without having to physically be there. And my company just moved to a new building in Boston, and we have, you know, video screens in every room. So it's like you're not in the room, but you're in the room, and it makes such a huge difference. And then lastly, you know, collaboration tools that help you keep your life together outside of work are as important as those tools that help you keep your life together in work, because like Lauren said earlier, like you bring your whole self to work. And so an example I put on here is Cozy, because this is a tool where I can give my babysitter a login. It can sync to my Google Calendar. I can put my grocery list on there if she needs to pick something up at the store for me, or, you know, my husband needs to know like who needs to be at what activity when I'm not around. Like, this is what helps keep the wheels turning and not coming off the bus, because it's so critical. And that's having that kind of organization, that kind of technology to support me outside of work helps me as much to be successful when I'm at work. So these are all critical things in addition to all the other tools we've talked about, you know, throughout this call.
Yeah, I have a poll question I'm interested in hearing because this is a good variety of tools that you've noted, different types of tools. So I'm wondering what technologies are most important to you to help have a positive experience at work. And this is, not just productivity tools. You mentioned, ways to touch base with your family. My daycare uses Brightwheel, and I'm on there all the time because they're like, oh, we need diapers, and oh, we're having, this Thanksgiving festival, and I need carrots. I don't know. But I kind of like live and die with that app. It's very important. Wow, we're getting it good. You guys are like crushing it. Yes, participation is like amazing right now. I'm really happy. Conferencing tools and mobile apps are coming in strong. Chat is also, yeah. So we've got conferencing tools like GoToWebinar, mobile apps like email and calendar so that you can be in touch on the go, chat like Slack and Teams, and then content management is huge, and then means to touch base with family. Great, yeah, so mobile apps and conferencing tools were kind of tied for the top. Awesome. So I'm going to turn it over to Sam. She's going to read out our Q&A. We've got some just sort of housekeeping questions. The slide deck as well as the recording will be posted. So that answers one of those questions. And then we have a whole bunch of questions for our panelists. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Kate. Just so everyone knows, too, if we don't get to your question, we will make sure to follow up individually after the fact to make sure everybody's questions have been answered. Okay, so back to the salary and asking for promotions. In terms of negotiating, would you also take the same measures when negotiating with a new company?
I'll jump in really quick. When you're negotiating with a new company, that's usually an opportunity when you have really significant leverage, in my opinion, because if you're in a final round or they're in a significant position where they're clearly making you an offer and you're negotiating the offer, they want you and they want your talent. So again, I would reiterate what Alex says. Many companies are public, many times through Glassdoor or through a wonderful tool called Google. You can actually find out what roles might make in terms of salary range, which gives you a really clear place to understand if the offer you're getting is fair and what you can negotiate. I would say, I think it was Lauren who said it's about data, it's about facts, what you're bringing, why those things are things that why your value and external marketplace, factors would lead to you having something. But again, I think you actually usually have more leverage in that case going into a new company with a new offer. I would say feel uncomfortable and go ask for it.
I've had this conversation so many times with like past employees and others, and it's like, what do you have to lose, right? If you don't ask for it right now, you have nothing to lose. And I've said this time and again, they're not going to rescind an offer because you ask for more money. I mean, at the worst case scenario, they'll just say no. So if you don't shoot for the stars right out of the gates, I mean, you have to be realistic, right? But like, if you don't ask for all those things, not just base salary, but be creative and, what else can you ask for? Like, that's it. Time's up. If you don't do it now, you're not going to do it 2 years in. I mean, you can ask for promotions and you can look at raises and things like that, but like, this is the time. Like when you're negotiating with a new company, if it's not now, you're not going to have that opportunity again.
For those of you on the call that are younger and wondering, well, what do we mean about what's on the table? Keep in mind that there's different kind of buckets of what to negotiate for. You've got salary, you might have time off and vacation, you might have flex time, and then you have equity. Don't sell yourself short on any of those things, especially equity. If your company is public, that represents either stock or stock options. If your company is not public, that means equity. But again, do your homework, right? If you are not a public company and you're funded by private equity, there is a goal there to probably to be sold, and there's a goal to be sold at a price. You got to kind of understand, what is the company, where's the company going? If you're asking for equity, is it realistic that you're asking for 10%, right? I mean, probably not accurate, right? So you've got to do your homework on the stock side. Don't ever leave anything on the table when you're leaving a company. If you're going from company A to company B, you don't accept an offer unless company B matches the stock that you had at the other company. Now, those are the tangible things when you negotiate. The intangible things are when you start comparing apples to oranges. And that's kind of what I was helping my friend through the other day, right? The salary was better. The flexibility for her job was lower, right? So she's giving up the flexibility from, clearly like I am right now, I'm working from my living room. She's giving that up. Right? So there is a financial and an emotional value to this woman in her 40s that she's saying that extra money, actually, what would have been something I would have been salivating over 15 years ago, isn't worth it to me anymore. It's not worth the emotional thing. And so I think when you're younger in your career, I think the tangible things are clear, right? It's time off, vacation, flexibility, equity, stock. When you get older, again, I don't want to use the older, wiser, more seasoned, it starts to take on, they're not going to stop paying you, right? Company's not going to, you're always going to get paid. You're going to have health insurance. Those are the two things, that are standard, or you wouldn't take the job. Everything else is negotiable. Everything.
And it's what motivates you too. I mean, like those softer things, like when I went through the time in my career when I had a young family, and you get a call at 11 because your kid's throwing up, needs to be taken out of daycare like immediately. You need flexibility, and you need that, so you might make different career choices during that time because you want to prioritize family. Or maybe you have, an aging parent or a healthcare issue in your family that you want to be able to be there for. So, it's definitely, you got to look at the whole thing. And things that are important to you at one phase in your career may take a lower or higher rating later on in your career. It's where you're at. It's a very personal decision.
Totally.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, ladies. Okay, next question. As a female with a big personality, I often fear I'm not perceived as serious enough or that I'm seen as dumb. In reality, I try to be my authentic, bubbly self. How do you balance credibility with authenticity of fun self at work?
Love that question.
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I have a self-deprecating sense of humor. So I have a tendency to walk into a room and put myself down, which there's all sorts of bad reasons for people. You probably shouldn't, that's not the tact to take. But I also want to let you know, like, it's not career limiting because I'm a VP and I was able to make it. So like, it gets back to, I think you got to read the room. You got to read the moment. Is it the right time to make a joke? Or, when I'm uncomfortable, sometimes I'll say something awkward. So silence, sometimes I'll just feel the need to fill the space with a sound. So I think, the more situations you're in, you just got to get better at reading the situation, whether it calls for a little bit of humor or maybe it's not the right time. And I don't think having a big, bold personality is going to be career limiting, because I think we're all testament here on this webinar that's, it's been career enhancing in my
But you've probably had Lauren 2 or 3 times. I mean, I think we all have big personalities.
For sure.
Right? There's been 2 or 3 times where it's probably been devastated you, right? You've done something wrong. You said something wrong at the wrong time. And that failure that you had, I'm sure, is the same that I had. That's the same as Jen, the same that Bailey had. That failure was, you were mortified and you learned something from that failure. And, for me, it was the read the room. It was the more and more I was feeling like I couldn't be my authentic self. It was like, well, I wasn't reading the room, right? I mean, read the room. Pause.
Yeah, that is like the definition of emotional intelligence, right? And great leadership, the more you work truly on yourself, self-reflection, self-awareness, you will not only become a better version of you, you'll become a better colleague and a better leader. So I think you should absolutely have that personality. But for any of us, based on all of our personalities, there's a place and time for everything. The one thing I would encourage too is, upon that self-reflection, some companies organizationally, like as a culture, don't respond to that well. Then you might ask yourself a larger question, like, are you at the right organization, right? Should you be at an organization that values something? Because if it's, don't put a round peg in a square hole, wait, opposite, something like that, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, you also want to be at a place that values you for who you are. And if you feel like that there's a tension there, I would stop and reflect on maybe even a bigger picture question about if you're at the right organization.
Right.
Great advice. Yes.
Awesome. Okay, Alex, this one is directed towards you. Can you just repeat the categories that you bucketed your performance in for the audience?
Oh, yeah. Let's see if I can remember them. There was 3. They were like concentric rings, right? And there was actually, not only are there 3 things, but they're concentric rings, like Olympic rings. So when they overlap and they in the middle, it's like worth extra points. What I had to do that like was the Olympic ring. Okay, so the first is making others great, right? Making others great. What have you done? This kind of falls into the sponsorship, the leadership, the advocacy, you know, what you're doing for others. The other was that I had was leveraging the work of others. This was the next surgeon, leveraging the work of others. This means Bailey is out there making others great, right? She's putting down the same activity. She takes a phone call with me. She is training me on my communication skills because she's just like, Alex, it's a hot mess. You know, let's work on this. And she puts it down as making others great. Okay. I put down that same activity as leveraging others, because when you're in an organization is about uplifting everybody and using the best resources. And so when you're in your performance review, you want to be showing not just, I know how to give to others and I'm so awesome, but it's also, I know that there's work that's been put out there that I need to leverage. I'm not recreating the wheel. You're leveraging the work of others. And some good examples of leveraging the work of others are sales templates or presentations, right? Bailey created a presentation that she's using for her next client meeting. She shared it with me. She puts that in her spreadsheet, and so do I. And so I actually, at the end of the year before my performance review, would almost have a column, sometimes 2, that would say who it was with. And I would tell Bailey, I'd be like, Bailey, I'm calling this out like 4 times that you've helped me. And Bailey's like, oh my gosh, I didn't put that down. And so, you know, kind of then when we talk about how we're mentoring, you kind of see how this all links together. So the first circle was making others great. The next was leveraging the work of others. And then the third for me was driving impact.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
When all 3 of those would meet.
You also talked about, I think you talked, Alex, about professional development as well.
Oh, yeah. So maybe there's 4. Maybe they were Olympic rings. Yeah, professional development. Yeah, I added that.
I just think that's something that people tend to put on the back burner, and I think it's something to make sure you keep.
Your company might even tell you, like your company, like start tuning in. And if you work at a larger company, you know, they may present it to you in their fiscal planning. Like these are the things that are important to us. You know, for me, at one of the large companies that I worked at, they were very public about what they called these circles. And so it wasn't hard for me to mimic it, because that's how you want to use the language that your leadership uses, so it makes sense to them.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Okay, and I think that is all the time we have for questions, so we're just going to pass it off to Kate to wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for attending. We got some really great advice here. We created a nice little community. It's been a wonderful hour. I'm very grateful to all of the panelists for their participation. I wanted to share a couple of fun resources that we found that we thought were really interesting to share with everybody, so you can take a look at some of these after the fact. So Sway is their hashtag is I think it's Sway the Conversation or something like that. It's a digital platform. It's dedicated to everything female, so health, lifestyle, politics, everything. Million Women Mentors is something that I found that was very interesting. This might be kind of right up your alley, you guys, for those of you who are looking for mentorship. opportunity. It's sponsored by STEM Connector, so it's a movement that's dedicated to connecting mentors and mentees with the goal of getting young women into the STEM field. Broadsheet by Fortune is just sort of a sub-publication of the Fortune magazine, but it's all articles that are focused on women and topics that are relevant to women. And then Career Contessa is a career site that's specifically built for women. So some of you who are younger in the audience might be interested in looking at that. There's advice, interviews, videos, all kinds of resources for you as you move yourself through your career. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so appreciative to our panelists. I'm so appreciative to our audience. You did a fantastic job with the polls and the questions, and the recording will be up on our website within 24 hours, and we will talk to you again soon. Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of your day.